Distinguished Mr. Li Shulei, Your Excellency Mr. Akmal Sadov, First Deputy Speaker of Uzbekistan, and Your Excellency Mr. Alfonso Morkui, Third Vice Prime Minister of the Government. And ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, it is a great pleasure to attend the forum on global human rights governance. On behalf of the Ministry of the Foreign Affairs of PRC, I would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you. Just now, Minister Li read out the congratulatory letter from President Xi Jinping, in which President Xi elaborated profoundly on the important proposition of promoting and protecting human rights, providing a Chinese solution for promoting global human rights governance, and a fundamental guidance for this forum. In October 2022, the 20th National Congress of the Communist Party of China was successfully held, drawing up a grand blueprint for building a strong modern socialist state and promoting the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation through Chinese-style modernization. President Xi clearly pointed out that we will adhere to China's path of human rights development, actively participate in global human rights governance, and promote the development of human rights in an all-round way. In the process of achieving Chinese-style modernization, China's human rights cause will be better protected and better promoted, and China will surely make greater contributions to global human rights governance. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, 30 years ago, the World Conference on Human Rights adopted the VDPA. The concepts of equality of all kinds of human rights, development for human rights, and cooperation for human rights have become increasingly popular. At present, the world is undergoing the most unprecedented changes in the century, facing a new round of turbulences and changes. The current global challenges are seriously affecting the economic and social development and livelihoods of developing countries. The tendency to politicize human rights is intensifying. The international human rights cause is facing serious challenges. Today we are gathering here in Beijing to discuss how to better implement the VDPA, which is of great importance. The essence of human rights lies in people, and people's well-being is the greatest human right. One important way of evaluating the country's human rights is to see whether the interests of the people are safeguarded and whether their sense of accomplishment, fulfillment, happiness, and security is enhanced. We must adhere to the people-centered concept of human rights, make people's aspiration for a better life the goal of our commitment. We need to constantly realize, safeguard, and develop the fundamental interests of the greatest number of people. The democratic rights of the people should be safeguarded so that they can become the main participants, promoters, and beneficiaries of the development of human rights. The right to survival and the right to development are the primary basic human rights. President Xi has put forward Global Security Initiative, Global Development Initiative, and Global Civilization Initiative, which are of great importance for protecting and safeguarding human rights. To this end, it is imperative to adhere to common, comprehensive, cooperative, and sustainable security, respect the sovereignty and territorial integrity of all countries, address the reasonable security concerns of all countries, and resolve disputes peacefully through dialogue and consultation. We should accelerate the implementation of the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. We know that development is for the people, depends on the people, and is shared by the people. We should strengthen international cooperation in development and safeguard the legitimate development rights of all countries. We should be open and inclusive, strengthen exchanges and mutual understanding, conduct dialogue and cooperation on human rights on the basis of equality and mutual respect, bridge differences through dialogue, enhance mutual trust through cooperation, and form a strong synergy to promote the healthy development of international human rights goals. There is no one-size-fits-all model of human rights in the world. Countries with different social, political conditions and historical and cultural traditions must and can only explore their own paths of human rights development in the light of their own history, reality, and people's needs. Blindly copying other countries' models will only make them unsuitable and even lead to disastrous consequences. The right of each country to choose its own path of human rights development should be respected. Global human rights governance should adhere to the principle of common consultation and shared benefits, and the international matters should be negotiated by all parties. Multilateral human rights institutions should uphold the principles of objectivity, impartiality, non-selectivity, and non-politicization. Abide by their own mandates, respect the sovereignty of member states, promote the construction dialogue and cooperation, and give equal importance to all human rights, including economic, social, civil, and political rights, and the right to development. The problem of insufficient voice and insufficient representation of developing countries in multilateral human rights institutions should be resolved as soon as possible. Some Western countries ignore their own serious human rights problems and go around acting as if they are human rights teachers, making false accusations against other countries, interfering in the internal affairs of other countries, and curbing others' development, leading to the politicization of multilateral human rights institutions and increasing confrontation, which must be resolutely resisted. As a promoter and practitioner of human rights, China has always actively participated in global human rights governance, earnestly fulfilled its obligations, and strengthened its cooperation with all parties on human rights. We stand ready to maximize the opportunity of the 30th anniversary of the VDPA to work with all other parties to promote the common values of peace, development, equity, justice, democracy, and freedom for all humanity, to promote global human rights governance in a more equitable, just, reasonable, and inclusive direction, to better build a community of a shared future and a better world in which human rights are enjoyed by all. And lastly, I wish this forum a full success. Thank you. Thank you, Vice Minister Ma. Now we would like to give the floor to the Chairman of China International Development Cooperation Agency, Mr. Luo Jiahui, please.
尊敬的中共中央政治局委员、
Distinguished
中宣部部长
member of
李
the
书磊阁
Senate
下，
Committee of the CPC,
尊
and
敬
Minister
的
of the
沙耶多副总理阁下，
Publicity
尊敬
Department,
的
Mr. Li
罗库瑞副总理
Shulei,
阁下，
and Your Excellency Mr.
女士们、先生们，
Sadidov,
大家上
and
午好。
Your Excellency
很高兴作为主办单位之
the
一
Vice
出席今天的
Prime
全球
Minister.
人权治理
So I'm very
高端
honored
论
to
坛。
attend the opening ceremony
联合
as
国
the
最新数据
organizer.
显示，
And
目前
according to the
全球
latest
超过8亿人
statistics of the United
正在饿。
Nations, currently over
3.5
800 million
亿人
people are
需要
starving,
紧急
and
人道主义救援。
350 million people need humanitarian
对这
assistance.
些人来说，
And for this part of
生存权
people,
当然最为
the
重要。
right to subsistence
联
is
合国
of
大家
course the most important thing.
193个成员中，
Among
有
the 193 members of the UN family, over 150 are developing countries,
85%
accounting for
对这些人
85% of the
国家
total.
来说，
For these people
发
and
展
countries, the
当然
right to
最为重要。
development is of course the
生
most
存
important
权、
matter.
发展权
The right
是
to
最基本的
subsistence
人
and
权，
development are the
这也
basic
是广
human
大发
rights,
展中
and
国
this
家
is
共识。
also the consensus of developing countries.
中国是发展中国家一员，
China is a member of
中国共
developing
产党
countries.
18大以来，
Since the 18th National Congress of the Communist Party of China, China has successfully eliminated absolute poverty, built a well-off society in an all-round way, and remained the second-largest economy in the world. We adhere to the whole process, people's democracy, devote ourselves to high-quality development, high-level opening up, promote common prosperity, and promote the rejuvenation of a strong country with Chinese-style modernization. China's amazing achievements have ensured the right to survival and development of the world's 1.4 billion people. Internationally, the 10 years have also been China's leading and shaping international development cooperation, and also the most active, effective, and greatest contribution for the country to promote the global human rights cause through international development cooperation. President Xi has deep insight into the world situation, grasps the trend of the times, and puts forward a series of groundbreaking new ideas and strategies for China's foreign aid and international development cooperation, such as building a community, a shared future for mankind, the BRI, the GDI, the GSI, and the GCI, so as to contribute China's wisdom, programs, and strengths to the realization of common development and promotion of human rights protection. The international influences of the concepts of promoting human rights through development and promoting human rights through cooperation is constantly improving. China has always believed that the right to subsistence is the most basic human right. In order to protect basic human rights, we have been helping people in other developing countries to improve their living standards. And during the COVID-19 pandemic, we carried out the largest and longest emergency humanitarian relief since the founding of the PRC. In the first half of the anti-pandemic efforts, we provided a large number of anti-pandemic materials to 151 countries and 13 international organizations, and sent medical experts to 34 countries. In the second half, we provided more than 2.2 billion doses of vaccines to more than 110 countries and 4 international organizations, and this effort is still ongoing. Getting enough to eat is the most basic survival need of humanity. And for a long time, China has provided a lot of food supplies to many countries. Recently, we have successfully provided emergency food aid to more than 30 countries, including Afghanistan, Sri Lanka, Uganda. And we also provide technical assistance and agricultural demonstration centers and carry out the agriculture talented people to contribute to the poverty reduction. And President Xi has always attached great importance to the poverty relief, and he has addressed the importance of the building of the small, smart, and pro-people projects. We have implemented many projects in health, vocational training, well drilling, and in total, there are more than 6,000 livelihood projects. 22 years ago, President Xi, the then governor of the Fujian province, promoted the Juntao technology as a official aid project in Papua New Guinea, PNG. So far, the Juntao technology has taken root in more than 100 countries around the world.
And China has actively carried out emergency humanitarian relief. And when developing countries suffer from natural and man-made disasters, we were the first lending a helping hand in time to help the needy. Recently, we provided emergency relief for floods in Pakistan, earthquakes in Turkey, and wars in Ukraine, benefiting tens of millions of victims. In the past 10 years, we have arranged nearly 400 emergency humanitarian rescue operations. We also attach great importance to public health aid and improve the medical and health level of developing countries. This year marks the 60th anniversary of China sending foreign aid medical teams. China has sent more than 1,100 medical teams and more than 30,000 medical personnel to 67 countries and regions in Asia, Africa, and Latin America, and treated 219 million patient times. artemisinin extracted by Professor Tu Yu has spanned the 4 seas and covered 5 continents in the past 50 years, which has made great contributions to mankind's victory over malaria. China has always believed that the right to development is the most basic human right. Development is the eternal theme of human society. Without development, there will be no human rights. And China has been protecting basic human rights and helping developing countries. And we have invested heavily in promoting global common development, especially improving the economy, society, and people's livelihood of developing countries through complete sets of projects, technical assistance, emergency humanitarian assistance, and human resources training. In recent years, the recipient countries have increased from more than 110 to more than 160, and the total amount of assistance has increased and the ways have expanded. In the 73 years since China's foreign aid, it has implemented thousands of complete sets of material projects, carried out tens of thousands of technical cooperation and human resource development cooperation projects. And building Belt and Road Initiative and realizing common development is another important part of our investment commitment. Belt and Road Initiative combines land and sea, spans east to the west, connecting ancient and modern times, and enjoys a prosperous life for all. So, it is also an important part of our effort in connecting the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals with our development initiatives. The Global Development Initiative put forward by President Xi Jinping in 2021 is a reaffirmation of the core human rights concept of human-centered remobilization of international development synergy and a push for the international community to focus on development issues. And in order to implement this initiative, President Xi announced a series of major initiatives in June last year. At present, the 4 billion Global Development and South-South Cooperation Fund is running smoothly, and the Global Development Promotion Center has been established, and the first high-level meeting of the Global Shared Development Action Forum will be held early next month, and a large number of important early harvest achievements won worldwide praise. So far, more than 100 countries and international organizations such as the UN have supported this initiative. China has been leading South-South cooperation. In 2015, President Xi Jinping announced the establishment of a South-South Cooperation Assistance Fund and ISSCAD. So far, the South-South Fund has expanded tripartite cooperation with more than a dozen international organizations, including the UN in the fields of public health, climate change, and others, and has implemented more than 130 projects in more than 50 countries, benefiting more than 20 million people. And China also attaches great importance to debt relief. China never forced debts, never seized other countries' national assets, and deprived other countries their right to development in the name of debts. And no country was caught in a debt crisis because of its participation in the BRI. At the same time, we need to realize that we are facing with global problems such as rising geopolitical conflicts, intensified competition among major powers, slowing North-South cooperation, widening development gap, and shifting development agenda. So the development of international human rights is facing severe challenges, and the peace deficit, development deficit, and human rights deficits are more prominent. Safeguarding the right to subsistence and development of all mankind and establishing human rights with people at the center is an important task. 75 years ago, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was born in the ruins of World War II, emphasizing the respect and protection of basic human rights. 30 years ago, the VDPA clarified the equal status of all kinds of human rights and became a milestone in international human rights. At present, facing the new situation, new tasks, we must consider the direction of the global human rights cause. First, we need to focus on solving the problem of unsafe development. Without security, there will be no development, let alone human rights. We should adhere to the concept of common, comprehensive, cooperative, and sustainable security, firmly support the core role of the United Nations in security governance, insist that our own security and common security, traditional security, non-traditional security, and development security are inseparable, should be actively promoted through dialogue and peaceful resolution. Secondly, we need to bring development issues back to the center of the international agenda. The 23rd Agenda for Sustainable Development is the broadest consensus for all countries on global development, and safeguarding basic human rights is also an important part of the goal of sustainable development. So we should adhere to true multilateralism, strengthen the overall coordination model of the United Nations, and rely on platforms such as this year's Sustainable Development Goals Summit, and the third South Summit, and the first high-level meeting of the Global Action Forum for Shared Development to deeply connect the Sustainable Development Agenda. Thirdly, we need to respect the diversity of human rights. Historical and cultural traditions, specific national conditions, the people's demands of different countries vary widely, and there's no one-size-fits-all human rights protection model in the world. And no one is entitled to be a judge of human rights. And human rights cannot be an excuse to interfere in other countries' internal affairs and curb their development. Fourthly, China will continue to increase investment in global development resources to add luster to the cause of human rights. And China will strive continuously for common development, and we will stick to our human rights development paths that fit China's specific conditions. We will take active part in global human rights governance, and we will have equal and fair dialogue with all parties and countries. And together we will promote the further development of human rights at the global level and build a community of shared destiny for all mankind. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Luo Zhaohui. Now, let me give the floor to First Deputy Speaker of the Legislative Chamber of Uzbekistan, Mr. Akmal Saidov. You have the floor, sir.
Good morning.
各位来宾早上好。
Excellency
尊敬的各位
Mr.
阁下。
Excellency Mr. Majaho and Mr. Liu Jiahe, the Excellencies, Chinese friends, representatives of foreign guests, representatives of diplomatic corps in Beijing, dear Chinese friends, ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to have been invited to participation in this forum on global human rights governance. I would like to start by emphasizing the significance of the year 2023. This year we celebrated the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the 30th anniversary of the Vienna Declaration and Program of Action. I would also like to make this opportunity to recognize the successful holding of the historic 20th National Congress of the Chinese Communist Party, as well as the recent presidential and parliamentary elections. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Pan Chun-chang, the Chinese expert on human rights, who played an active role in the drafting of Universal Declaration of Human Rights, believed that Confucianism laid the groundwork for human rights ideas. While Confucius' teaching did not explicitly address the concept of human rights as it's understood in modern times, his emphasis on virtues, empathy, and social harmony can be seen as foundations, principles that align with the values underlining human rights. Ladies and gentlemen, my speech consisted in three parts. The first concerning the importance of 30th anniversary of VDPA, The second, about the Chinese initiatives in the field of human rights. And third, about the briefing about the situation on human rights in Uzbekistan. The Secretary General, United States, Mr. Antonio Guterres said the Universal Declaration on Human Rights was adopted 75 years ago. The declaration described for the first time entitlements that apply to everyone, everywhere, always. The most translated document in the world, this declaration was translated more than 1,500 languages in the world. And English version of declaration is just 1,300 words long. But all human life is here. It's very important, and will be continued, celebrated, and fully implemented the provisions of VADPI. Ladies and gentlemen, I recently finished reading President of China Xi Jinping's book on respecting and protecting human rights, and was very impressive. I think today's congratulatory letter of the President is a logical continuation of his conception on the Chinese human rights conception. China has made certain advancements in promoting and protecting human rights over the 10 years. I think it's very important. China has indeed gained a significant presence on the global stage, and its voice is increasingly heard in various international arenas. President Xi Jinping wrote, "It is necessary to respect human rights progress in all countries. The national traits of each country are different. There are differences in history and culture, on the social system, the level of socio-economic development. It is only necessary and possible to proceed from the actual situation in the country and people's need in order to find and appreciate the way to do with human rights." These are words of the President Xi Jinping. While international discussions and cooperation on human rights are important, it is also recognized that countries have different historical, cultural, and social contexts in shape their approach to human rights. Ladies and gentlemen, the theme of the forum is very important. It's very significant in commemorating this significant anniversary. It marked a significant milestone in global human rights governance and set the stage for promoting equality, cooperation, and development worldwide. As we commemorate the 13th anniversary with DPA, it's crucial to reflect on the achievements, challenges, and the way forward in advancing human rights. Over the past 3 decades, the WDPA had made a profound impact on human rights governance at the national, regional, and international levels. It provided a framework for governments, civil society organizations, and other stakeholders to work together towards and promotion and protection of human rights. Colleagues, dear friends, Uzbekistan has made efforts to address human rights issues and promote reforms within the country in recent years. The government of Uzbekistan, under the leadership of the President, Mr. Shavkat Mirziyoyev, has taken steps towards improving the human rights situation and implementing changes and implementing international standards in the field of human rights. Uzbekistan is undergoing a constitutional reform with the active involvement of civil society with the primary goal of putting the man, society, and state development principle into practice. Constitutional reform was held in last month, and we are grateful to our Polish friends for participation in as international observers from China also. On July 9, the election of the President of Uzbekistan will be held according to the new constitution of Uzbekistan and will undoubtedly have a positive influence on the direction of future democratic reforms in our country. Ensuring human rights and interests, as well as protecting human dignity, are main cornerstone of the constitutional reform. In this regard, I want to note that the number of norms, articles of the Constitution related to human rights is increasing more than 3 times. We also use the constitutional experience of China regarding the amendments of 2004 and 2018. Regarding the commemorating the 75th anniversary of Universal Declaration of Human Rights and 30th anniversary of VDPI, Uzbekistan was adopted concrete steps. The first, on May, President of Uzbekistan approved the action plan on celebration of the 75th anniversary of the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Second, in accordance with the Vienna Declaration, the presidential decree on the National Human Rights Education Program in the Republic of Uzbekistan was approved. Third, creation of National Program for Human Rights Education to direct and guide the efforts of an acting up of National Commission to monitor and lead the progress in this field proves that the country is a reality on the path of genuinely acquiring women and men in every walk of life. And last, by the initiative of the Uzbekistan General Assembly of the United Nations was adopted special resolution on enhancing the rule of Parliament in accelerating the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. And we recognize the crucial role of Parliament in advancing Sustainable Development Goals. It's very important. The adoption of this resolution was proposed by the President during the 75th session of the UN General Assembly in 2020. By promoting dialogue, cooperation, and respect for human rights, we can strive for a just, equal, and inclusive world for all. Ladies and gentlemen, let us work together to create a world where every individual rights, every human rights are cherished and upheld by all. Let us strive for a society where justice and equality prevail, where no one is left behind, and where human rights are not just a theoretical concept, but a lived reality for all. Let us work together to build a society which benefits every individual and to raise individuals who benefit for society. The journey may be challenging, but with collective determination, unwavering commitment, corpus of oriental wisdom at our disposal, and the guiding principles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and VDPA, we can build a future that is brighter, fairer, and more just. Thank you for all your attention, and may our shared commitment to human rights lead us to a better world for generations to come. Thank you.
谢谢赛义多夫先生的精彩指出。
Thank you, Mr. Saidov, for your wonderful remarks. And now we would like to give the floor to Mr. Nansua Monkey, Third Vice Prime Minister of the Equatorial Guinea.
Excelencias,
Excellencies,
señoras,
ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor for me to participate in the work of this World Forum on Human Rights. I take the opportunity to greet the government of the People's Republic of China and all the organizers of the event. On behalf of the people of Equatorial Guinea, its President and Head of State, His Excellency Ambia Numa Mombasonga, of his government and of my own, express to you the fervent greetings of peace and solidarity. Excellencies, today, good governance and human rights are important, and the recurring themes in international development cooperation, international cooperation systems, their mechanisms and instruments lay the foundations for an interdependent world. Good governance makes us comply with our commitments, promises, and recommendations on cross-cutting issues of human rights based on civil, political, economic, social, and international cooperation. Good governance and human rights urge the countries to guarantee the rule of law through democratic institutions, good management of public services, and the fight against corruption. This forum takes place at a very turbulent time in the world, with war actions, the economic crisis, the health crisis, and a lot of instability in various countries, and issues that represent challenges for the effective enjoyment of human rights. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen and lecturers, in this intervention, we address in a unique way the global evolution of human rights in Equatorial Guinea, whose subject has been dealt with in a systematic and positive way since the day of the freedom coup on August the 3rd, 1979. From this, it was established in the country a new regime that introduced changes and advances, that is gradually implementing a situation of recognition and respect for fundamental rights and freedoms. The development and implementation of the fundamental law in Equatorial Guinea has allowed the elaboration and promulgation of various laws that have had a favorable impact on the evolution of human rights in the country. The signing and ratification of the international human rights treaties has reinforced the positive nature of the aforementioned evolution. All of this has formed a system for the protection of citizen rights, the most important being current legislation, judicial intervention, and development programs. National institutions have been created in the country in charge of promoting and guaranteeing human rights and thus monitoring their violation. My government is deploying efforts in all sectors to guarantee the right to education, health, social security, access to drinking water, social housing, development projects and programs that support economic and social policies for poverty reduction, and an agenda for the diversification of the sources of growth. With the new constitution reform, new constitutional bodies were created, a bicameral parliament, a council of the Republic, the Ombudsman, and the Court of Accounts. Equatorial Guinea has been involved in the United Nations mechanism by submitting periodical reports and the Universal Periodic Review, the UPR, and maintains close cooperation with UNDP, UNICEF, and the United Nations Centers for Human Rights and Democracy in Central Africa. Equatorial Guinea has integrated these Sustainable Development Goals for the 2030 Agenda into its development planning schemes to achieve socio-economic and environmental development. The government has sanctioned the new penal code contemplated in the Article 26, the total abolition of the death penalty. The efforts have been redoubled in the fight against the corruption by setting up the Court of Accounts and Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office. The law against the prevention and punishment of torture and the law on the smuggling of migrants and human trafficking have been promulgated within the framework of strengthening national capacities. Greater emphasis is placed on the training of public order agents so that they can effectively carry out their functions and consolidate their capacity to guarantee the protection and respect for human rights. Equatorial Guinea has assumed the commitment to forge a firm democracy in which we uphold the independence of the judiciary and legal guarantee in its international relations within scrupulous respect for its constitution. My government attaches great importance to the mechanisms of the UN because they are the ones that lay the foundations for the interaction between states. We ratify our commitment to the international human rights systems, and we always open the country to the scrutiny of the international cooperation. I wish the success of the work of this global forum. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mr. Alfonso Nsue. Now, with great honor, let me give the floor to Madam Veronica Burga, Chief of Staff, Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights.
Thank you, Mr. Sun Yeli, Your Excellency, Mr. Li Shulei, Your Excellency, Mr. Ma Zhaozhu, Your Excellency Mr. Duo Zawowi, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I am really pleased to be here today representing the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. I would like to extend our appreciation to the government of China for hosting this important event to commemorate the 30th anniversary of the Vienna Declaration and Programme of Action. Later this year, we will also be celebrating the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, a document drawn from cultures across the world which has powered enormous changes in lives, policies, and mindsets. During this important anniversary year, we aspire for these two milestone documents to serve as catalysts for reaffirming our unwavering commitment to the promotion and protection of human rights for all individuals, irrespective of their differences or background, everywhere in the world, without selectivity or politicization. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, the Universal Declaration on Human Rights and the Vienna Declaration unequivocally affirmed that human rights are universal, inseparable, interconnected, and mutually dependent, firmly dismissing the notion that certain rights could be treated as optional. The Vienna Declaration emphasized the importance of respecting cultural diversity, while making it clear that cultural differences can never be used as a pretext for violating human rights. It also clearly acknowledged that the international community has a legitimate responsibility and obligation to promote and safeguard all human rights. In the seventh of the UN human rights bodies is essential to enable states to fulfill their duties to people. The Vienna Declaration also gave the impulse for the creation of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. Today, the Office has presences in over 90 countries, leading to positive outcomes for the people. The visionary ideas expressed in the Universal Declaration established a strong basis for the creation of 10 international human rights treaties that encompass a diverse array of civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights. To assist compliance with these international human rights obligations, so-called treaty bodies have been established to serve as vital mechanisms for monitoring human rights progress across the globe. The Human Rights Council is the intergovernmental body with the primary responsibility within the United Nations for addressing human rights-related issues. Through its resolutions and decisions, the Council guides the actions of states and other stakeholders at both national and international level. It further disposes of two important mechanisms, namely special procedures and the Universal Periodic Review. Special procedures conduct visits, provide key recommendations, engage on individual cases, and contribute to the development of normative frameworks. Each year, special procedures mandate holders collectively conduct between 60 and 80 country visits. 128 states have extended standing invitations to special procedures, and we encourage others to emulate this positive practice. Through its Universal Periodic Review, the Human Rights Council further facilitates intergovernmental peer reviews, allowing for meaningful engagement at the country level over a period of 4.5 years. The Universal Periodic Review, the UPR, with the involvement of 100% of UN member states and inclusion of civil society voices, is a reaffirmation that universal human rights scrutiny is a legitimate, positive and cooperative matter of international concern. The UPR process is intended to result into the implementation of recommendations, and we hope that at each cycle and through voluntary midterm reporting, states can show concrete progress in addressing existing concerns. Human rights mechanisms do not work in silos from the rest of the UN system. The General Assembly provides a platform for states to address human rights issues, share experiences, and advocate for resolutions that protect human rights globally. Similarly, the Security Council recognizes that human rights violations can fuel conflicts and instability. It incorporates human rights concern into its decision-making processes, taking measures to address violations, demand accountability, and protect civilians from the scourge of conflicts. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development highlights the interconnectedness of peace, development, and human rights, addressing poverty, inequality, and lack of access to services as human rights issues, and emphasizing the need to combat discrimination, promote social inclusion, and provide equal opportunities for everyone. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, in spite of the numerous accomplishments and progress made in recent decades, we are witnessing concerning setbacks in human rights across almost every region worldwide. Countless individuals in many countries endure the devastating impact of conflict and oppression on a daily basis. These crises unfold amidst a highly intricate geopolitical panorama marked by widening divisions and confrontations within and between nations, posing a serious obstacle to much-needed multilateral solutions. Sadly, we are witnessing regression in the rights of women and girls in various countries around the globe. Minorities continue to face discrimination and exclusion, including from economic and social development. Civic space in many places is also shrinking, with an increasing number of states resorting to measures to suppress dissenting voices and opinions, including threats, intimidation, violence, and criminal procedures against journalists and human rights defenders. Hate speech is spreading at unprecedented rates and through ever-expanding new channels, posing challenges unlike anything we have seen before. The rapid digital transformation, including advances in artificial intelligence, is reshaping our world, often outpacing the establishment of necessary human rights safeguards by regulators. This puts us at risk, as these technological shifts need careful oversight to protect us from potential dangers, while maintaining freedom of expression and the right to information. Above all, the triple planetary crisis consisting of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution poses the most significant threat humanity has ever faced. In addressing this crisis, human rights considerations are essential to ensure that measures taken to mitigate and adapt to environmental challenges do not disproportionately impact vulnerable communities or infringe upon their rights. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, as the world is shifting away from decades of progress on human rights, the human rights ecosystem can serve as a catalyst for dialogue, cooperation, and inclusive decision-making processes. In an interconnected world where crises transcend national borders, the human rights ecosystem contributes to the strengthening of global governance by fostering collaboration and coordination among states. It facilitates the exchange of good practices, encourages mutual learning, and enables the development of common strategies to address shared challenges. By transcending national boundaries, the human rights ecosystem also promotes a sense of collective responsibility. However, the effectiveness of the human rights ecosystem depends on the commitment and engagement of states and other stakeholders. It requires robust financial and political support, transparent and meaningful cooperation, as well as genuine willingness to take action to ensure compliance with human rights standards. Respecting and protecting human rights not only enhances states' own legitimacy, but also strengthens the credibility and effectiveness of global governance. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, as we commemorate the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it is crucial to view this milestone as an opportunity to reset our understanding and regain trust in the power of human rights. We need to forge a new worldwide consensus on human rights. They should not be perceived as a divisive concept, but rather as a unifying force, capable of addressing the pressing challenges we face today. By embracing the universality, interrelatedness, and non-discriminatory nature of human rights, we can foster greater cooperation, solidarity, understanding, and progress to the benefit of all. As the High Commissioner said, and I quote, "Equality, justice, freedom, shared development, and participation in decision-making are values that we all share and deserve. They can and should be brought to life using diverse methods in different societies, but they are not restricted to one region, ethnic group, or sex or gender." End quote. Let us seize the opportunity of this anniversary year to enhance our work together, building a future where human rights serve as the bedrock of global governance and where the inherent dignity of every individual is at the center of our action and fully respected. Many thanks.
Thank you, Madam Veronica Berga. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. Just now, Mr. Li Shulei read out the congratulatory letter from President Xi Jinping and delivered a wonderful keynote speech. Mr. Ma Zhaoxu, Guo Zhaohui, Mr. Saidov, Mr. Nsui, and Ms. Berga shared their insights around the theme of the forum from different perspectives, which were very inspiring and beneficial to all of us. We believe that with our joint efforts, this forum will build stronger and wider consensus on human rights, promote solidarity and cooperation, and contribute wisdom and strength to promoting international human rights cause and advancing international human rights governance in a more fair, just, reasonable, and inclusive direction. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, with this, we now conclude the opening ceremony of this forum. Please come back for our keynote session after a 20-minute coffee break. Thank you.
只有各国人民都过上好日子，繁荣才能持久，安全才有保障，人权才有基础。
In today's China, under the leadership of the Communist Party of China, the fate of countless people has been changed. China's human rights cause has achieved all-round development. China takes a people-centered approach and stays committed to boosting human rights with development, providing inspirations for other developing countries.
We believe that China, with its experience of defeating poverty, can provide a good model and good support to developing countries in coming out of this.
Така че това, че Китай действително ликвидира абсолютната бедност, т.е. достигна така нареченото общество сялка, действително това е един абсолютен успех. Това бих казал постижение не само за Китай, а за цялото човечество.
消除绝对贫困是中国民生改善的里程碑，是中国人权事业的历史性成就，也是人类进步事业的壮丽篇章。
China has been upholding the common values of humanity featuring peace, development, equity, justice, democracy and freedom, making contributions to the advancement of global human rights, and continuously injecting new impetus into realizing the human rights goals established by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the Vienna Declaration and Programme of Action. China has put forward the Global Development Initiative and announced 32 important measures to implement the GDI.
L'évaluation est positive, mais cette évaluation positive aussi peut amener à penser à d'autres aspects pour avoir beaucoup plus d'effets et d'impact.
The Chinese have done a tremendous work in terms of complementing
health service delivery in this country.
And I think that China's efforts at, first trying through industrial development and the building of infrastructure and other kinds of things, I think those are very useful ways to start to uplift other countries out of poverty.
China follows the Global Security Initiative to safeguard world peace and helps make the sound of peace echo throughout the world.
Ключов момент, когато ние говорим за правото на хората, това е правото на живот. А правото на живот в международен план, това означава да няма войни, да има мир.
We're not going to build what needs to be built if we don't have a peaceful world.
I think China, in many cases, have shown the usage of Chinese power, right? But especially China's sovereign and smart power as the way that has made you a solution provider for regional and global affairs.
China has long spoken out for developing countries, supporting them in safeguarding their own interests and opposing Western countries in politicizing human rights issues and interfering in developing countries' internal affairs. China opposes forcing unilateral sanctions and depriving other countries of their rights to survival and development. China urges relevant countries to stop infringing upon the human rights in other countries and respect the path of human rights development independently chosen by other peoples.
China has a very important role in general in these big political debates of our time.
China's role is important. China today is creating platforms, mechanisms, meetings, getting people together to understand the real voice of the people.
Solidarity for development, solidarity to confront epidemics, solidarity to eradicate poverty, and solidarity to achieve the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. This is where now the Chinese leadership came up with this idea of building a community of shared destiny for mankind.
China has blazed the path of human rights development with Chinese characteristics. It firmly supports the advancement of human rights in the vast number of developing countries and has made its contributions to breaking the discourse monopoly of the Western countries in the field of human rights and enriching the international discourse of human rights development.
Es gibt verschiedene Entwicklungen in der Realisierung der Menschenrechte.
China is a global voice, and China's voice is heard and respected.
只有各国人民都过上好日子，繁荣才能持久，安全才有保障，人权才有基础。
In today's China, under the leadership of the Communist Party of China, the fate of countless people has been changed. China's human rights cause has achieved all-round development. China takes a people-centered approach and stays committed to boosting human rights with development, providing inspirations for other developing countries.
We believe that China, with its experience of defeating poverty, can provide a good model and good support to developing countries in coming out of this.
Така че това, че Китай действително ликвидира абсолютната бедност, т.е. достигна така нареченото общество сялка, действително това е един абсолютен успех. Това бих казал постижение не само за Китай, а за цялото човечество.
消除绝对贫困是中国民生改善的里程碑，是中国人权事业的历史性成就，也是人类进步事业的壮丽篇章。
China has been upholding the common values of humanity featuring peace, development, equity, justice, democracy and freedom, making contributions to the advancement of global human rights, and continuously injecting new impetus into realizing the human rights goals established by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the Vienna Declaration and Programme of Action. China has put forward the Global Development Initiative and announced 32 important measures to implement the GDI.
L'évaluation est positive, mais cette évaluation positive aussi peut amener à penser à d'autres aspects pour avoir beaucoup plus d'effets et d'impact.
The Chinese have done a tremendous work in terms of complementing health service delivery in this country.
And I think that China's efforts at, first trying through industrial development and the building of infrastructure and other kinds of things, I think those are very useful ways to start to uplift other countries out of poverty.
China follows the Global Security Initiative to safeguard world peace and helps make the sound of peace echo throughout the world.
Ключов момент, когато ние говорим за правото на хората, това е правото на живот. А правото на живот в международен план, това означава да няма войни, да има мир.
We're not going to build what needs to be built if we don't have a peaceful world.
I think China, in many cases, have shown the usage of Chinese power, right? But especially China's sovereign and smart power as a way that has made you a solution provider for regional and global affairs.
China has long spoken out for developing countries, supporting them in safeguarding their own interests and opposing Western countries in politicizing human rights issues and interfering in developing countries' internal affairs. China opposes forcing unilateral sanctions and depriving other countries of their rights to survival and development. China urges relevant countries to stop infringing upon the human rights in other countries and respect the path of human rights development independently chosen by other peoples.
China has a very important role in general in these big political debates of our time.
China's role is important. China today is creating platforms, mechanisms, meetings, getting people together to understand the real voice of the people.
Solidarity for development, solidarity to confront epidemics, solidarity to eradicate poverty, and solidarity to achieve the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. This is where now the Chinese leadership came up with this idea of building a community of shared destiny for mankind.
China has blazed the path of human rights development with Chinese characteristics. It firmly supports the advancement of human rights in the vast number of developing countries and has made its contributions to breaking the discourse monopoly of the Western countries in the field of human rights and enriching the international discourse of human rights development.
Es gibt verschiedene Entwicklungen in der Realisierung der Menschenrechte.
China is a global voice, and China's voice is heard and respected.
只有各国人民都过上好日子，繁荣才能持久，安全才有保障，人权才有基础。
In today's China, under the leadership of the Communist Party of China, the fate of countless people has been changed. China's human rights cause has achieved all-round development. China takes a people-centered approach and stays committed to boosting human rights with development, providing inspirations for other developing countries.
We believe that China, with its experience of defeating poverty, can provide a good model and good support to developing countries in coming out of this.
Така че това, че Китай действително ликвидира абсолютната бедност, т.е. достигна така нареченото общество сялка, действително това е един абсолютен успех. Това бих казал постижение не само за Китай, а за цялото човечество.
消除绝对贫困是中国民生改善的里程碑，是中国人权事业的历史性成就，也是人类进步事业的壮丽篇章。
China has been upholding the common values of humanity featuring peace, development, equity, justice, democracy and freedom, making contributions to the advancement of global human rights, and continuously injecting new impetus into realizing the human rights goals established by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the Vienna Declaration and Programme of Action. China has put forward the Global Development Initiative and announced 32 important measures to implement the GDI.
L'évaluation est positive, mais cette évaluation positive aussi peut amener à penser à d'autres aspects pour avoir beaucoup plus d'effets et d'impact.
The Chinese have done a tremendous work in terms of complementing health service delivery in this country.
And I think that China's efforts at, first trying through industrial development and the building of infrastructure and other kinds of things, I think those are very useful ways to start to uplift other countries out of poverty.
China follows the Global Security Initiative to safeguard world peace and helps make the sound of peace echo throughout the world.
Ключов момент, когато ние говорим за правото на хората, това е правото на живот. А правото на живот в международен план, това означава да няма войни, да има мир.
We're not going to build what needs to be built if we don't have a peaceful world.
I think China, in many cases, have shown the usage of Chinese power, right? But especially China's sovereign and smart power as a way that has made you a solution provider for regional and world affairs.
China has long spoken out for developing countries, supporting them in safeguarding their own interests and opposing Western countries in politicizing human rights issues and interfering in developing countries' internal affairs. China opposes forcing unilateral sanctions and depriving other countries of their rights to survival and development. China urges relevant countries to stop infringing upon the human rights in other countries and respect the path of human rights development independently chosen by other peoples.
China has a very important role in general in these big political debates of our time.
China's role is important. China today is creating platforms, mechanisms, meetings, getting people together to understand the real voice of the people.
Solidarity for development, solidarity to confront epidemics, solidarity to eradicate poverty, and solidarity to achieve the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. This is where now the Chinese leadership came up with this idea of building a community of shared destiny for mankind.
China has blazed the path of human rights development with Chinese characteristics. It firmly supports the advancement of human rights in the vast number of developing countries and has made its contributions to breaking the discourse monopoly of the Western countries in the field of human rights and enriching the international discourse of human rights development.
Es gibt verschiedene Entwicklungen in der Realisierung der Menschenrechte.
China is a global voice, and China's voice is heard and respected.
只有各国人民都过上好日子，繁荣才能持久，安全才有保障，人权才有基础。
In today's China, under the leadership of the Communist Party of China, the fate of countless people has been changed. China's human rights cause has achieved all-round development. China takes a people-centered approach and stays committed to boosting human rights with development, providing inspirations for other developing countries.
We believe that China, with its experience of defeating poverty, can provide a good model and good support to developing countries in coming out of this.
Така че това, че Китай действително ликвидира абсолютната бедност, т.е. достигна така нареченото общество Сяока, действително това е един абсолютен успех. Това бих казал постижение не само за Китай, а за цялото човечество.
消除绝对贫困是中国民生改善的里程碑，是中国人权事业的历史性成就，也是人类进步事业的壮丽篇章。
China has been upholding the common values of humanity featuring peace, development, equity, justice, democracy and freedom, making contributions to the advancement of global human rights, and continuously injecting new impetus into realizing the human rights goals established by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the Vienna Declaration and Programme of Action. China has put forward the Global Development Initiative and announced 32 important measures to implement the GDI.
L'évaluation est positive, mais cette évaluation positive aussi peut amener à penser à d'autres aspects pour avoir beaucoup plus d'effets et d'impact.
The Chinese have done a tremendous work in terms of complementing health service delivery in this country.
And I think that China's efforts at, first trying through industrial development and the building of infrastructure and other kinds of things. I think those are very useful ways to start to uplift other countries out of poverty.
China follows the Global Security Initiative to safeguard world peace and helps make the sound of peace echo throughout the world.
Ключов момент, когато ние говорим за правото на хората, това е правото на живот. А правото на живот в международен план, това означава да няма войни, да има мир.
We're not going to build what needs to be built if we don't have a peaceful world.
I think China, in many cases, have shown the usage of Chinese power, right? But especially China's sovereign and smart power as a way that has made you a solution provider for regional and world affairs.
China has long spoken out for developing countries, supporting them in safeguarding their own interests and opposing Western countries in politicizing human rights issues and interfering in developing countries' internal affairs. China opposes forcing unilateral sanctions and depriving other countries of their rights to survival and development. China urges relevant countries to stop infringing upon the human rights in other countries and respect the path of human.
女士们、先生们，大家上午好！欢迎大家回到全球人权治理高端论坛。我是中央广播电视总台主持人王冠。
I'm Wang Guan, the moderator for this session. I'm from CGTN.
Welcome back to the Global Forum on Human Rights. I'm Wang Guan, news anchor and journalist from China Media Group, CCTV and CGTN. 刚刚，中国国家主席习近平专门发来贺信，提出弘扬全人类共同价值，以安全守。
President Xi Jinping sent his congratulatory letter stating that China will promote and protect human rights from the perspective of security. China safeguards human rights and protect human rights through development and through cooperation.
For improving the human rights issue around the world, and his endorsement for improving global solidarity on the issue of human rights. It is truly encouraging to hear that congratulatory letter from the Chinese president. 我们还注意到此次论坛有几个特点：第一是层次高，第二是代表性强，第三是地域分布广，第四是问题和议题开放前沿。Now, ladies and gentlemen, exactly 30 years ago, the United Nations held the World Conference on Human Rights in Vienna, as many of the previous guests have rightly pointed out. And in that conference, a Vienna Declaration and Program of Action was adopted. Now, 3 decades later, we're facing a time of unprecedented challenges and uncertainties. And it is fair to say that it is time to take stock. How to increase international cooperation to promote global human rights, how to understand and apply President Xi Jinping's Global Security Initiative, Global Development Initiative, and Global Civilizations Initiative. And to what extent can we strengthen effective governance to address inequality, disparity when it comes to human rights? These are the pressing issues of our times. And we will hear from 10 keynote speakers to address those issues. 首先，让我们用热烈的掌声，有请新华通讯社社长傅华先生发表主旨演讲。Now let's welcome Mr. Fu Hua, President of Xinhua News Agency, to deliver a keynote speech. 大家掌声欢迎。
Distinguished leaders, delegates, scholars, experts, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, good morning. I'm very pleased here to join you at this forum on global human rights governance in this beautiful season here in Beijing. First of all, on behalf of Xinhua News Agency, I'd like to extend my congratulations on this forum. Just now, Minister Li Shulei read out President Xi Jinping's congratulatory letter to this forum. In this letter, President Xi Jinping elaborates on the importance of building a community of shared destiny for mankind and the importance of safeguarding, protecting, and promoting human rights from the perspective of security, development, and cooperation, thus laying a sound foundation and providing a very important guideline for us to join hands in promoting human rights development in the world while building a more beautiful world. Chinese culture has always been based on the respect and humanities for mankind. And the saints in Chinese history has always proposed important philosophies such as people staying at the heart of good governance. People are the most important assets in our society, emphasizing the significance and value of individuals and human beings. As our history and times proceed, human rights have become important benchmarks and results in our civilization progress and our cultural development, and also the fundamental spirits in safeguarding and respecting human rights in our modern culture. It is also an indispensable part of the aspirations and commitments of CPC of China. Ever since its birth, CPC has always been paying close attention and being completely committed to the interest of the people. Over the past 100 years, the CPC has been committed to the well-being of the Chinese people, rejuvenation of the Chinese nation, the progress of all mankind, and also the common good for all the peoples around the world. And to that end, China has been learning from other countries and international communities in this regard. And President Xi Jinping has pointed out that promoting and developing human rights is the common cause for all of us, and every country is entitled to choose their own path in terms of human rights protection and promotion. And countries from different cultures and civilizations must respect each other, be inclusive to each other, and learn from each other. Xinhua News Agency, as an important national news media and a world media, has always been attaching great importance to the China's human rights philosophies and in the promotion of human rights for Chinese people and also the world. Now the world is facing with unprecedented challenges and changes, and the global human rights governance is now facing multiple challenges. Xinhua News Agency will maximize our resources and strengths in stimulating and facilitating the news report and think tank research in human rights, thus making our contribution to human rights protection, promotion, and development, not just at the national level, but also at the international level. First of all, we will be continuously committed to the Chinese human rights development philosophy, because with our talented personnel, we have been committed to reporting and covering and disseminating the important philosophies and guidelines made by President Xi Jinping and our human rights agencies, elaborating on how China has been making best efforts in ensuring, protecting, and promoting human rights for its people, because this is where the national interest lies, this is where our well-being lies, and also this is the root of China's human rights cause. And secondly, we will make full use of the existing channels, technologies, and networks to make sure that we well disseminate the literacy and knowledge about human rights, guide the public opinions, forge consensus among different people and groups, so that we can forge synergies in promoting human rights in China and in the world, opening up new chapters in this regard. Thirdly, we will continue our international efforts and investment in telling the best version of a Chinese story. And Xinhua News Agency will maximize our strengths as an international news agency and will use innovative channels and languages in expressing ourselves, in expanding our communication channels, and in demonstrating Chinese path of promoting and protecting human rights and also the rights to development. And we will continue to do our best to cover the stories and news about human rights and also Chinese achievements, Chinese solutions, and Chinese programs.
And to promote the international community to have a better understanding of China's human rights cause, fourth, to promote communication and mutual learning and international human rights cause. Human rights are historic, specific, realistic, and different civilizations have different values on human rights, different historical and realistic foundations. Xinhua News Agency stands ready to work with other media organizations in the world in the spirit of solidarity, cooperation, development-driven multilateralism, co-governance, inclusiveness, and mutual learning to practice true multilateralism and fully tap the values of human rights civilization, provide platform for equal dialogue, communication, and to serve as a bridge for mutual learning, communication, and to jointly promote the global human rights cause towards a direction that is more equitable, just, reasonable, and inclusive. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, 30 years ago, as the co-chair country of the Second World Conference on Human Rights, China participated in the drafting of the VDPA. Over the past 3 decades, under the encouragement of VDPA, the international community has been exploring the effective way to promote and protect human rights and promote the sustainable development of the cause. I hope that through this forum we can share our wisdom, ideas, and to make greater contribution for the progress of global human rights and the building of the community of shared future for mankind. Thank you.
好，感谢傅华社长的精彩演讲。Thank you very much, Mr. Fu Hua. That was a very instructive speech. 接下来有请安提瓜和巴布达外交、农业、贸易和巴布达事务部部长埃沃利·保罗·切特格林先生发言。Now it is my honor to welcome Mr. Everly Paul Chet Green, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Agriculture, Trade and Barbuda Affairs from Antigua and Barbuda. 大家掌声欢迎。Let's welcome.
Thank you, moderator, government and UN officials, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Excellencies, we are gathered here today to commemorate a momentous occasion and in further recognition of the significant role played by the United Nations in facilitating peace and goodwill among the nations of the world. It was 30 years ago that the UN held the World Conference on Human Rights in Vienna and adopted the Vienna Declaration and Program of Action. That was 1993. A milestone in the history of the world human rights cause. This declaration emphasized the equality and indivisibility of human rights. Today we are gathered here not only to commemorate the establishment of this important and necessary declaration, but also ensure that the nations of the world strive to maintain the key elements of this global declaration. This revered instrument celebrates the universality of human beings and human rights, emphasizes that all human rights are universal, indivisible, interrelated, and interdependent. It rejects cultural relativism and asserts that human rights apply to all individuals, regardless of their culture, religion, or social and economic development. It recognizes, too, the importance of addressing both civil and political rights, such as freedom of expression and the right to a fair trial, and economic, social, and cultural rights, such as the right to education and the right to health. This holistic approach has helped to broaden the understanding of human rights and encouraging the comprehensive approach to the implementation. Yet another important element of the Vienna Declaration on the Human Rights is the strengthening of human rights institutions, the promotion and protection of human rights at the domestic level. It also recognizes the role of the international and regional human rights mechanisms, such as the UN Human Rights Council and the treaty bodies in monitoring and addressing human rights violations. It allows for the empowerment of marginalized groups by addressing discrimination and promoting the rights of vulnerable and marginalized groups, including women, children, indigenous people, and persons with disabilities. The VDPA also emphasizes the importance of human rights, education, awareness raising, and promoting of a culture of human rights, encouraging states to incorporate human rights education in school curricula and to disseminate information about human rights to the general public. This emphasis on education has helped to foster greater understanding and respect for human rights among individuals and communities. Another critical element of the VDPA is the significance of international cooperation in promoting and protecting human rights. It encourages states to work together, share best practices, and provide technical assistance to strengthen human rights systems globally. This emphasis on cooperation has facilitated dialogue and collaboration among states and has also contributed to the advancement of human rights worldwide. In Antigua and Barbuda, my government, through our constitution, adheres to and seeks to ensure that the key elements of the VDPA are implemented as part of our system of governance. In 2019, my country acceded to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, as well as in economic, social, and cultural rights. Under the leadership of the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, our national authorities and civil society organizations receive support, guidance, and expertise in dealing with reporting and monitoring of human rights issues and systems in Antigua and Barbuda. Of special note and significance is the CARICOM Charter of Civil Society, which was signed in Antigua and Barbuda in 1997, providing a framework for the protection of fundamental human rights and freedoms in the Caribbean area. This charter states that all signatories, and I quote, shall respect the fundamental human rights and freedoms of the individual without distinction as to the age, color, creed, disability, ethnicity, gender, language, place of birth or origin, political opinion, race, religion, or social class, and is subject to respect for the rights and freedoms of others and for the public interest, end of quote. The CARICOM Charter goes on to state that fundamental human rights and freedoms include the right to life, liberty, and security of the person, protection for the privacy of home and other property of the individual, protection from deprivation of property without due process and just compensation within a reasonable time, freedom of conscience, of expression, and of assembly and association within the meaning of the constituents of the states, freedom of movement within the Caribbean community, subject to such exceptions and qualifications as may be authorized by the national law, and which are reasonably justified in a free and democratic society. The Charter further articulates that states shall promote and encourage the effective exercise of civil and political rights, and within the limits of their resources, economic, social, and cultural rights, all of which derive from the inherent dignity of the human person, and which are essential for the free and full development of the person. It is important to note, colleagues, that while the VDPA itself is not a legally binding document, it has served as a guiding framework for human rights advocacy and action in Antigua and Barbuda, and indeed the rest of the Caribbean. Its impact can be seen in the continued efforts to address human rights violations, promote equality, and empower marginalized communities around the world. The People's Republic of China's people-centered approach to human rights management speaks to the fact that people are what human rights are all about. This approach focuses on a philosophy that promotes people as the real masters of their destiny through effective civil and political consultations. This was evident in the manner in which China managed the COVID-19 pandemic nationally and its massive outreach to the rest of the world. Excellencies, it is fair to state that the value of human rights to global social development is quintessential to the achievement of social, economic, political growth and the development of the global citizenry. Human rights declarations establish a normative framework that sets out the fundamental rights and freedoms that every individual should enjoy. They provide a universally recognized standard by which and against which governments and societies can be measured. This framework guides policies, legislation, and practices, ensuring that social development is grounded in principles of equality, justice, and dignity. These declarations often serve as a foundation for legally binding international treaties and conventions that provide legal protections for individuals and enable them to seek remedies when their rights are violated. Human rights declarations hold governments accountable for the protection and promotion of human ideals. This accountability mechanism helps to drive positive social change and ensures that governments prioritize the well-being and rights of their citizens. They also further help to raise awareness about human rights principles and values. They educate individuals, communities, and organizations about their rights and empower them to demand justice and equality, acting as a catalyst for social movement, advocacy campaigns, and civil society engagements, driving societal transformation and societal development. Human rights declarations foster international cooperation by creating a shared language and common understanding of human values. Through international cooperation, countries can learn from each other, develop joint strategies, and address global challenges that impede social development. Human rights declarations also emphasize the principles of non-discrimination and inclusivity. They call for equal rights and opportunities for all individuals, irrespective of race, ethnicity, gender, religion, or social status. By promoting inclusivity, declarations also contribute to social development by ensuring that marginalized and vulnerable groups have access to resources, services, and participation in decision-making processes. Permit me, my dear colleagues, to therefore encapsulate my thesis, and that is that global human rights declarations play a crucial role in shaping social development. They provide a normative foundation, legal protections, accountability mechanisms, awareness and advocacy platforms, international cooperation, and also promote inclusive development. By upholding human rights principles, societies can strive towards more equitable, just, and sustainable social development for all. As we gather here today, 30 years on, I encourage us to recommit to the ideals of the VDP, which has brought the world much benefit. I thank you.
感谢格林部长的精彩致辞。Thank you very much, Mr. Green, for those great insights. 接下来有请全国政协常委、民族和宗教委员会副主任、中国人权研究会常务副部长蒋介国先生发言。有请蒋介国主任，大家掌声欢迎。
China Society for Human Rights Studies to give a speech.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, good morning. China is an important advocate and a practitioner of the spirit of VDPA and a participant, builder, and contributor to global human rights governance. Actually, the past 3 decades have witnessed China implementing VDPA, generating impressive results. And it has made historic achievements in China's human rights cause, chartered a path of human rights development that conforms to the trend of the times and suits its national specific conditions, made great contributions to the development and progress of international human rights cause. As a representative of the China Society of Human Rights Studies and the co-organizer of this high-level forum, I'd like to share with you some of China's approaches and reflections on the implementation of VDPA. I'd like to share with you 3 observations. First, we must always adhere to the idea that the happiness of the people is the greatest human right, and we must fully dedicate to the cause of human rights in China. China has always taken the people's aspiration for a better life as its goal and reflected our people's aspirations, interests, rights, and well-being in all aspects of the development of human rights. So China has been committed to all the process, what we call a all-process commitment. Since the 18th CPC National Congress, the CPC Central Committee, with President Xi Jinping at its core, has adhered, as it has always been, to the people-centered development philosophy, implemented the new development philosophy in a complete, accurate, and all-round manner, and promote economic development, democracy, and rule of law, ideology and culture, fairness and justice, social governance, and environmental protection in a coordinated manner, striving to achieve higher quality of development, more efficient, fairer, more sustainable, and safer development. And Chinese people's sense of fulfillment, happiness, and security has become richer, more secure, and more sustainable. Second, we have always honored our solemn commitment to make new and greater contributions to mankind and vigorously promoted the common development of the global human rights cause. Now, CPC China has always taken its mission to make new and greater contributions to mankind. We firmly believe that only when people of all countries live a good life can prosperity be sustained, security and human rights guaranteed. China took the lead in achieving the UN SDGs and in implementing in United Nations MDGs and in implementing the 2030 SDGs, contributing more than 70% to the global poverty reduction. China provides development assistance to developing countries through construction projects, supplies, technical cooperation, humanitarian assistance, and debt relief, and many others. Such assistances and reliefs, including a series of major infrastructure projects and many small, smart, and pro-people projects, have played an important role in helping developing countries enhance their development capacity, improve people's livelihood, and promote human rights development. And China has always been committed to building a community with a shared future for mankind, providing more public goods to the international human rights field, promoting human rights development through diversity, independence, and openness, and constantly enriching human rights civilization. Thirdly, we must always respect other countries' path of human rights development and firmly oppose hegemony and bullying practices. Countries differ in history, culture, civilization, inherent social development, and economic level, so they must and can only explore their own path of human rights development in light of their actual conditions and the needs of their peoples. Unfortunately, some countries are actually using human rights as their excuses to interfere with other countries' internal affairs, and they are obsessed with double standards, recklessly interfere in other countries' internal affairs in the name of human rights, and they willfully impose unilateral sanctions and even start wars to create division, confrontation, and turmoil. These countries are preaching fake human rights, fake humanity, and fake democracy, pursuing real hegemony and hegemonism and real bullying. It has seriously affected the healthy development of the world human rights cause. China firmly opposes the instrumentalization, politicization, and ideologicalization of the human rights issues. The empty talk of human rights without considering social and political conditions and historical and cultural traditions, and the practice of hegemony and bullying in the name of human rights should never be practiced by any country. And we believe that different civilizations and countries should respect, tolerate each other, exchange and learn from each other so as to make global human rights governance more fair, just, reasonable, and inclusive. And in that way, can we create a better future for the world and making our world fairer, more just, more reasonable, and more tolerant. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, the 20th CPC National Congress identified specifically the central task of building a greater modern socialist country in all respects, achieving its second centenary goal and comprehensively promoting the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation through Chinese modernization. In the process of promoting the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation through Chinese modernization, all human rights will surely achieve comprehensive and coordinated development. We're also convinced that China modernization will also inject strong momentum into the efforts of all countries in the world to meet human rights challenges and achieve common development. And China will make new and greater contributions to the better world with a stronger human rights cause. Thank you.
感谢蒋建国主任的精彩发言和见地见解。Thank you very much, Mr. Jiang, for your very insightful speech. Thank you very much. 接下来有请联合国经济社会及文化权利委员会副主席兼报告员、莫斯科国际关系学院国际法系主任阿斯兰·阿巴西泽先生发言。Now it is my pleasure to welcome Mr. Aslan Abashiza, member of the United Nations Committee on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, also Vice Chairman and Rapporteur of the Committee, Head of the Department of the International Law at Moscow State University Relations.
Dear colleagues, friends, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to express my thanks for invitation and for possibility to speak here in my private capacity. In accordance with joint statement of the Russian Federation and People's Republic of China on the international relations dated on February 4th, 2022, humanity is entering a new era of profound transformation. It sees the development of such process as transformation of global governance, architecture, and world order. Main task of our high-level forum is jointly discuss solution to challenges of human rights deficits and make global human rights governance more fair, equitable, and inclusive after 75 years of the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and 30 years of the adoption of Vienna Declaration and Program of Action. The international community is showing a growing demand for the leadership aiming at peaceful and gradual development. Overwhelming majority of states are supporting the concept of constructing a community of common destiny for mankind proposed by the People's Republic of China and the efforts taken by the Russian Federation to establish a joint multipolar system of international relations to create conditions to enable any state to renounce neocolonial or hegemonic ambitions. During the meeting with United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, in March 2022, the President of China, Xi Jinping, pointed out that on the basis of equality and mutual respect, China is ready to actively conduct human rights dialogue and cooperation with all other parties to expand common understanding reduce differences, promote mutual learning, seek progress together, and jointly advance to international human rights cause for the greater benefits of peoples across the world. These remarks made by the President of China are fully based on the provisions of the United Nations Charter and Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Among these provisions, there is a great foundational principle of global human rights governance, which consists of two commitments of the states of the anti-Hitler coalition encapsulated in Articles 55 and 56 of the United Nations Charter. First, it's a commitment of themselves to the pursuit of international cooperation for the promotion of human rights for all people. And another one, it's a pledge themselves to take measures jointly and separate for the achievement of universal respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms. These commitments are now international legal obligation of 193 UN member states. Human Rights Action Plan of China 21-25 contains Chapter 6, which is entirely devoted to the participation of China in global human rights governance, including fulfillment obligations to International Human Rights Convention and engaging substantially in the work of United Nations human rights bodies. In the context of valuable remarks made by the President of China, Xi Jinping, especially the need to expand common understanding, let me quote the end of the preamble of the Universal Declaration, which says, I quote, "A common understanding on human rights and fundamental freedoms is of greater importance for the full realization of this pledge." It is also timely to remind that the General Assembly proclaimed the Universal Declaration as a common standard of achievement for all nations, to the end that all peoples shall strive by progressive measures, national and international, to secure human rights universal recognition. Let me put questions. First, we have achieved a common understanding of these rights and freedoms. And second one, we can secure this universal recognition of human rights. On the one hand, one could say yes, referring to the adoption of the International Bill of Human Rights and other core international agreements on human rights, which form the basis of the United Nations Human Rights Mechanism and the Human Rights Treaty Body System. On the other hand, no, bearing in mind the fact that the participation of the United Nations member states in the two covenants on human rights did not make them universal. The 1993 Vienna Declaration claims that all human rights are indivisible, but in practice, these rights are divisible by the two covenants and by separate international monitoring bodies. Unfortunately, we are still on the way of achieving common understanding, not only on substantive issues of human rights, but also procedural issues too. That's why we need to strengthen, first of all, global human rights mechanism for promotion process in order to create an atmosphere of constructive dialogue and confidence between state parties and global human rights mechanism. It should be stressed that decisive role in the protection of human rights belongs to states, and great achievement in this matter depends on national support efforts. In this context, let me say that the realization of moderate prosperity is not only a glorious achievement of the Communist Party of China for the Chinese people. I would like to remind that China is home to nearly 1/5 of the world population. Its complete eradication of extreme poverty that fuels the United Nations 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development 10 years ahead of schedule is a milestone in not only the history of the Chinese nations, but also in the history of mankind too, making an important conditions to the course of global poverty alleviation. At the end of my speech, let me put question. What is the fate of the current global human rights governance? What should be kept and should be changed? The clear answer is given by the President of China, Xi Jinping. He marked 4 priorities. First, putting people front and center. Second one, respecting different countries' path of human rights development. Third, following a holistic approach to all categories of human rights. And last one, stepping up global human rights governance. In joint statement, as I mentioned at the beginning, the sides underline that Russia and China, as world power and permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, intend to firmly adhere to moral principles and accept their responsibility, strongly advocate the international system with the central coordinating role of the United Nations in international affairs, defend the world order based on international law, including the purposes and principles of the United Nations Charter, advance multipolar and promote the democratization of international relations, together create an even more prospering, stable, and just world, jointly build international relations of a new type. Thank you very much for your attention.
感谢阿巴西泽先生的精彩发言。Thank you very much, sir, for your very thoughtful recommendations. 接下来，我们有请美国库恩基金会主席罗伯特·劳伦斯·库恩先生发言，他将进行线上致辞。Now let's welcome Mr. Robert Lawrence Cohen, Chairman of the Cohen Foundation.
各位来宾，朋友们，你们好。It is a pleasure to participate in this timely and relevant forum, Equality, Cooperation, and Development, the 30th anniversary of the Vienna Declaration and Program of Action and Global Human Rights Governance. Other than global economic and social imbalances and climate change, human rights are the most important challenge for the international community. If our group can articulate the shared human values of human rights and can array the diversified international approaches in this forum and in future forums, we will have made a vital contribution to China's role in the world and to the well-being of the entire world. I look forward to contributing. My presentation today focuses on the link between human rights and what China calls its whole process people's democracy, a mysterious phrase to Westerners who assume that China's political system, which has neither multiple parties nor general elections, can be in no way democratic. Yet, when President Xi Jinping explains China's great rejuvenation, China's second centenary goal of becoming a fully modernized socialist nation by the 100th anniversary of the People's Republic of China in 2049, he uses 6 aspirational adjectives, the third of which is democratic. He calls democracy a shared value of humanity and a key tenet upheld by the party and the Chinese people, to be used, he says, to solve the problems that the people want to solve. The party's call is to expand the orderly political participation of the people, to strengthen the protection of human rights and the rule of law, and to ensure that the people enjoy extensive rights and freedoms in accordance with the law, thus enhancing whole process people's democracy enhances human rights. Democracy in the party-led system involves absorbing political opinion via feedback mechanisms, such as polling to discern what people think, for example, about proposed new policies, a process that the party calls pooling people's wisdom. Another example is when officials are nominated to new positions, there is a period of time for candid feedback from colleagues and subordinates, as well as from superiors. So, Even though there are no elections in the Western sense, there is a good deal of engagement with different constituencies. In enhancing whole process people's democracy, President Xi calls for upholding and improving the People's Congress system, stressing properly and effectively exercising their power of overship. Moreover, the work reports of party leadership at party congresses every 5 years and of the government at the National People's Congress every year reflect a good deal of input and suggestions from all relevant officials, experts, and constituencies. The documents circulate iteratively many times during the 6 to 8 months or more of the drafting period. I like to stress the increasing role of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference in the development and deliberative and consultative democracy, because even though the CPPCC has no formal power, it has the growing social powers of expertise, influence, and public pressure. I have been coming to China for more than 30 years. I have traveled across China, visiting over 100 cities with my long-term partner, Adam Zhu, for research and interviews, books and essays, television, and documentaries. Yet, as much as I thought I knew China, I did not appreciate all that is required for poverty alleviation until I visited poor villages and regions, especially remote mountain villages, and spoke with poor villagers. It was in 2013 that President Xi first proposed the concept of targeted or precision poverty alleviation. Targeted means standardized procedures and individualized programs to bring each poor family out of poverty. 5 levels of local party secretaries coordinated their roles: provincial, municipal, county, township, and village. Third-party evaluations were conducted regularly and randomly to ensure accuracy and honesty. I was startled to discover that every poor family in China had its own file. That's millions of poor families, each with its own customized plan, each checked monthly and digitized for central compilation and analysis. Equally startling, local officials were dispatched to impoverished villages to manage poverty alleviation for 2 years or more. After China eliminated all extreme poverty in 2020, relative poverty was still extant, of course, and thus President Xi set a broader, longer-range, multi-decade goal: common prosperity. My friends in China ask, why does the world misunderstand the party? The problem, I argue, is partly semantics, because the English word party connotes, in democratic political systems, a political party that competes in free and open multi-party elections, such that when a ruling party does not compete in free and open multi-party elections, that political system is deemed not democratic. This portrait mispaints the Chinese system, which is founded on a different principle, where the party is the ruling organization, not a competing political party. It is a dedicated elite from all sectors of society, consisting of less than 7% of the population, but tasked to represent 100% of the population. Thus, the party, as the ruling organization, is not the equivalent of a ruling political party in Western systems, where political parties represent only a certain group of voters and are time-bound by election cycles. For this reason, the Chinese party, the CPC, has a higher and broader obligation to enhance the living standards and personal well-being of all Chinese citizens. This includes reforms, rule of law, transparency in government, public participation in governance, increasing democracy, and various freedoms, including freedoms of expression, and of course, human rights. These are real challenges. All political parties, all political systems have trade-offs, and while achieving national objectives is indeed an advantage of China's party-led system, it is not the only criterion for evaluating systems. This is why continuing reform, opening up, and system improvement are needed. Looking ahead, given both that democracy and human rights are aspirational as part of China's mid-century goals, what kinds of system improvements need to be made? What are the boundaries for improvements? What is the optimal balance between development to achieve common prosperity and freedom of expression? And how will that balance change over time? A final point about President Xi Jinping. Foreigners may be surprised to learn that he has considered poverty alleviation to be his most important task. He made the remarkable statement, "I have spent more energy on poverty alleviation than on anything else." I know no other national leader who has made such an assertion. For China, poverty alleviation exemplifies human rights, and for the party to develop both human rights and democracy is both a mission and a challenge. Thank you. 谢谢.
Thank you very much, Robert. Thank you indeed. 接下来，我们有请香港中文大学深圳教授、前海国际事务研究院院长郑永年先生发表演讲。Now let's give the floor to Mr. Zheng Yongyan, Professor of the Chinese University of Hong Kong, Shenzhen, and also President of the Shanghai Institute for International Affairs. Professor Zheng, welcome. 大家掌声欢迎。
各位领导
Dear leaders,
嘉宾
dear guests,
女士们、先生们，大家
ladies and gentlemen, good morning.
我想用这个机会就发展
On this occasion, I would like to
台积电的4点
share with you
观察。
some of my personal observations.
我想说的第一点呢，
So the first thing
所有的人权
is that
具有历史性，
all the human rights are historical.
实现的。
They were realized in a historical span of
英
time.
国20世纪中期呀，
We all know that the T.H. Marshall, a famous British sociologist in the mid-20th century, gave a speech
他做了一个
entitled
Alfred Marshall Lecture。
Citizenship and Social Class at the annual lecture in memory of Alfred Marshall, an economist also surnamed Marshall, at Cambridge University in 1949. So this speech is about citizenship and social class.
这个人权、公民身份。
And taking UK as an example, this speech intended to analyze the relationship among civil rights, social practices,
Political and social.
social policies, and capitalist market economy.
欧洲啊，西欧
And
公民权呢
he believed that in Western Europe,
18世纪得到实现。
the civil rights can be traced back to the 18th century. Political rights were realized in 19th century, and social rights realized in the 20th century. Personally, for his observation regarding civil rights and political rights and social rights, I think this definition of these three notions can be discussed. And now, in the West, it's believed that human rights are inborn, inherent. Actually, the achievement, realization of human rights are historical, meaning that in different historical stages, we can achieve certain human rights. As he said that in the 18th century, the civil rights were already achieved in the West. Actually, I don't agree with that, because the civil rights were only achieved in the 18th century for the capitalists and merchants. For example, the women and also minority groups in the UK got no rights in the 18th century. And regarding the political rights, actually, the Western countries first achieved the economic rights and then followed by social rights and then political rights. Political rights refer to what we mean one person, one vote. And also, in the 1960s, with the civil rights movement in the U.S., the civil rights were gradually being achieved in the U.S. step by step. So there is this sequence. And another observation is that development is a precondition for realization of human rights, or human rights are a byproduct of development. On this issue, I think this can be applied to all countries because without development there can be no human rights.
Meaning that we need to make the cake bigger in order to make sure everyone can benefit. So this is really pronounced in this modern society. Economic development goes before distribution of social wealth. So when middle class grow up, then the higher level of democracy can be realized. So the same is true when it comes to the Western countries. So Marx criticized capitalism, and then because he believed that capitalism caused social division, and then social divisions caused revolutions and many other social and economic changes. And then in the 1960s, here came the one person, one vote system. So which one goes first? Democracy, development, economic development? So all these actually, I believe, development or democracy, they are all the preconditions for the realization of human rights. But when human rights become part of our ideology, then some countries, particularly the Western countries, started to propose human rights go before development. And there are a lot of attached conditions for development. I personally believe that this kind of attachment, in other words, caused to the fact that a lot of developing countries have been trapped in poverty for years in the past. So the Western democracy is not that closely related to human rights, because one person, one vote doesn't necessarily bring or ensure human rights. Actually, we know there was a famous politician in Germany called Bismarck, the Iron Prime Minister. So after, and he established their fundamental social system. So I think the United States itself is a very good example here. It claims it is the most democratic country in the world, but it doesn't necessarily mean that American people enjoy the maximum level of human rights in the world. And the United States is the richest country, but at the same time, it is the least equal country in the world. And the human rights in the United States were not fully demonstrated in its development, which means that the benefits of human rights development is not completely and fully shared by its citizens. Now back to another topic, which is colonialism. Many professors elaborate on pro-colonialism and other social systems, but many countries started to politicize human rights instead of creating and promoting human rights. And I personally believe that this is one of the reasons there are so many developed countries trapped in their development dilemmas. Another point I would like to make is that realizing human rights requires leadership of the government. It is true everywhere, be it East or the West. So about Bismarck, he established very powerful government to ensure and safeguard human rights. So without the leadership of the government, however economically developed a country is, human rights are not necessarily protected and promoted. Another story about China shows us that 800 million people, Chinese people, were lifted out of poverty. And China has made heavy investment in that regard. And there are many other stories, like Singapore, all demonstrate that an effective government is an indispensable force to safeguard human rights, particularly when it comes to East Asian countries. Because for Western countries or developed countries, there has been a very long process of violent revolution to realize human rights. But in Asian countries, it is the effective national governments that provide the basic welfare to their citizens before realizing their human rights. And I think the Chinese government has been doing a wonderful job in creating benefits and welfares to their people. And in that way, Chinese government safeguarded and protected human rights for its citizens. So my point here is that every country has a country-specific practice or experience in promoting and protecting human rights, because every country comes from a different culture, different history. So it is very important for countries around the world to share their experience, their best practices, so that they can create better conditions to make sure that everyone can really enjoy their human rights. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Zheng, for your very thoughtful speech. 接下来让我们有请瑞典“一带一路”研究所所长史蒂芬·布劳尔先生发言。Now let's give the floor to Mr. Stephen Brouwer from the Belt and Road Institute. He's the chairman of the Belt and Road Initiative, the institute in Sweden. Let's welcome. 大家掌声欢迎。
Thank you, Mr. Li Shulei, Mr. Mao, Excellencies, Ministers, distinguished guests, friends, ladies and gentlemen. The title of my remarks is The Significance of History and Culture on Global Human Rights Governance. The dramatic and profound changes that are emerging worldwide can be effectively connected to the rise of a new China. This is expressed clearly in Xi Jinping's thought on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era. And the importance of understanding and of studying these ideas for not only the people of the People's Republic of China, but even more importantly for the rest of the world. These ideas cannot any longer be ignored. In fact, a great majority of the world's populations are embracing the ideas. As chairman of the Belt and Road Institute in Sweden, it has been my goal to promote and educate Swedes, other Europeans, and ultimately even the United States and world citizens in general to the great advantages that the Belt and Road Initiative has for global development and cooperation. We celebrate this year, 2023, the 10th anniversary since China's President Xi Jinping launched the initiative in 2013. So in addition to being honored to represent the importance of the BRI to my fellow Swedes and Europeans who have yet to seemingly in general understand the importance of it, it gives me great personal happiness to advance this cause for a community for a shared future for mankind. I'm convinced it is the pathway to peace as well as to true human rights in the proper sense of development and the elimination of global poverty. As a philosophical thinker and educator, I am deeply connected to the importance of the BRI, and it is through culture and history, as my friend, China's ambassador to Sweden, Cui Amin, expressed it in an article published in Sweden, through culture, we are more united than divided. Of course, this is dependent upon certain common fundamental principles of human society and culture that unite us. These are, in my view, the basic goodness of men and women. Secondly, the harmonious nature of humanity in relation to the universe and the unique quality of creative and innovative thinking, which separates human beings from the lower beasts and animals. Shakespeare expressed this most beautifully as man and women as the crown of creation. When we live and understand one another in light of these ideas, we communicate, we cooperate, we discover and find friendship and trust. We build bridges between cultures. As Xi Jinping's extremely important latest initiative for a global civilization initiative reflects this. Naturally, there are differences and they must be respected, but they do not need to divide us. Rather, in the best sense, they teach us to learn from each other. Unfortunately, the present ongoing effort to demonize China coming from the US, the UK, and the G7 is based on a combination of fear and virtual total ignorance of both modern China and the great history of over 5,000-year-old civilization. I fully respect the sovereign choice of political system of the People's Republic of China, yet I see the Belt and Road Initiative emerging out of this very long and profound history of China. Western political leaders presently lack any insight into this great long history. They are trapped in a philosophical basement of Western philosophical thinking, Hobbesian view that sees men and women fundamentally as only evil and egotistical. Therefore, they operate on the law of the jungle. They consider brute force to be the solution to problems, and they cannot and do not trust others. And this is creating the basis for the great geopolitical conflicts that are terrorizing and tragically affecting the human race at the moment. And this kind of Hobbesian view, this lacks any substance in protecting or defending human rights as it has been expressed by others here. However, from my view, there is a bridge that is both a true basis for optimism as well as cross-cultural understanding that will and can unite both East and West in the right spirit. It is a period of history from 1647 to 1716. That is the time of a philosopher and scientist and economist, Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz. And I am a strong Leibnizian thinker and follower. I'm told that, although I haven't had the personal pleasure of meeting President Xi Jinping, that he is a great admirer of Leibniz, which I fully understand. I hope I will have the chance to meet and share ideas with him, because I consider President Xi Jinping not only the great leader, but the philosophical thinker that is affecting the direction of history. Leibniz's thinking and life works address this spirit of optimism, reaching from China, from Europe to China, and even from Europe to the English colonies that were to become the future United States. And I'm going to read just one very brief quote to give you a flavor. This is from Leibniz's writings on China. It was entitled The Latest News of China, to give you a taste of what I think the spirit can be to unite Western thinking, which at this moment is highly problematic. When I mean by Europe, the G7, the United States, in a different direction, because this is, Leibniz was a thinker who emerged out of, at the time, Germany, what was at that time. So let me read the short ideas. I consider it a singular plan of the fates that human civilization and refinement should today be concentrated, as it were, in the two extremes of our continent, in Europe and in China, which addresses the Orient as Europe does the opposite edge of the earth. Perhaps supreme providence has ordained such an arrangement so that the most cultivated and distant peoples stretch out their arms to each other. Those in between may gradually be brought to a better way of life. That is the spirit of cooperation, the Belt and Road, and this, in my view, is a living part of history that is as much relevant for the present challenges that we face in the world today as it was during the time that Leibniz lived. At some point in the near future, I can elaborate on these ideas in a more, a longer possibility, but one crucial idea is this idea of the common good for all people. I believe is the pathway to improved relations and what Leibniz called a commerce of light. This is where human rights and the BRI can merge to give the world a community for a shared future for mankind. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brar. I think it's fair to say that you broadened our understanding of human rights. Very inspiring speech. Thank you. 接下来，让我们有请科特迪瓦国家人权理事会主席纳米扎塔桑加雷女士发言。Now let's give the floor to Ms. Namizata Sangari, President of the National Human Rights Council of Côte d'Ivoire. Let's welcome. 大家掌声欢迎。
Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les ministres, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les ambassadeurs, Mesdames et Messieurs les présidents des institutions nationales des droits de l'homme, chers collègues, distingués participants,
dear guests, distinguished leaders, distinguished experts, ladies and gentlemen,
le Conseil national des droits de l'homme de la Côte d'Ivoire se réjouit de l'invitation au Forum sur la gouvernance des droits de l'homme.
It's a great honor for our organization to attend this Forum on Global Human Rights Governance, which is themed by equality, cooperation and development.
Ma gratitude à son Excellence, Monsieur l'ambassadeur de la République.
So, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the ambassador to China, we thank for this invitation to attend the forum, and also we would like to thank the organizer and the embassy. And today we have this opportunity to consider about this topic of human rights and reflect on the challenges of world peace, development, and respect for human rights. Allow me first of all to pay homage to all those in the world who have dedicated or continue to dedicate their lives to the promotion and protection of human rights. Their unwavering commitment to the justice and human dignity is an inspiration to us all. Through their unremitting efforts, we have made considerable progress in recognizing the fundamental rights of human and regardless of their origin, gender, religion, or social status. Nevertheless, much remains to be done. Hence, the relevance of this forum is very meaningful. The idea of Chinese President Xi Jinping, here I quote, choose openness rather than isolation, cooperation rather than confrontation, win-win results rather than zero-sum games. End of quote. This is a call for unity to continue to implement the VDPA and further strengthen its key principles, namely the universality of human rights and the duty of states to defend these rights. We must mobilize, as proclaimed in the VDPA, to protect women's rights and fight against impunity, because equality is the core of human rights vision. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we must redouble efforts to eradicate all forms of discrimination and inequality, whether based on gender, race, religion, or any other characteristic. We should commit ourselves resolutely to building inclusive societies where every individual can enjoy his or her fundamental rights without hindrance. International cooperation is an important factor in achieving this goal. No country, no matter how powerful, can claim to solve the global problems we are facing on its own. We must work hand in hand together. Just like today, across the national boundaries and differences, to build stable and lasting partnerships. This requires a sincere dialogue, active listening, and a mutual compromise. Only the cooperation based on mutual respect and equality can lead to lasting and sustainable solutions. Ladies and gentlemen, honored participants, the Congress of Vienna marked the beginning of the adoption process in the optional protocol of International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, which came into force in May 2013. Enables individuals to take legal action at international level when their economic, social, and cultural rights have been violated. The Congress also reinforced the role of human rights governance in ending poverty and promoting sustainable development. Indeed, we are concerned about the economic growth which can benefit all, especially the vulnerable group in our society. This means we should invest in education, health, drinking water, food, energy, as well as in environmental protection and climate justice. By working together to eliminate poverty and social injustice, we can create a better future for the generations to come. Ladies and gentlemen, the 30th anniversary of the VDPA is therefore a reminder of our shared responsibility to humanity. The challenges we face may seem insurmountable, but united by the values of equality, cooperation, and development, we can make a difference. As President of the National Human Rights Institute of Côte d'Ivoire and President of the Human Rights Commission of French-speaking region, I pledge to continue to defend these principles and promote the protection of human rights at all levels. Ladies and gentlemen, at the end, I would like to reiterate the full support of the National Council for Human Rights for this forum, which I am convinced that we will create new ways to make human rights governance more effective and more equitable throughout the world. Thank you for your kind attention.
感谢桑加雷女士的精彩发言。Thank you very much, Madame Sangari, for your speech. Thank you indeed. 接下来，让我们有请加蓬司法长喜人权和性别平等部部长达马斯女士发言。Our next speaker is Madame Erlene Damas, Minister of Justice for Gabon. She's also the keeper of the seals in charge of human rights and gender equality. Let's welcome. 大家掌声欢迎。
Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, en vos rangs, grades et qualités, tout protocole respecté.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear experts,
c'est avec un intérêt particulier que nous prenons part au nom du gouvernement
and
gabonais
we are quite honored to attend this Forum on Global Human Rights Governance, and also as we celebrate the 30th anniversary of VDPA.
Et nous profitons de cette occasion pour féliciter la République populaire
So,
de
taking this opportunity, I would like to reiterate our gratitude for China's organization of this important event.
Nous souhaitons également souligner que l'organisation par la
And we
République
would also
populaire
like
de Chine de
to
plusieurs forums,
suggest
la
that
participation
China has
régulière
hosted
de
many
représentants
important
de plusieurs
events,
États traduit sans contexte
and many countries have participated in the events. This shows our commitment to our people's welfare and our will to guarantee their enjoyment of civil, political, economic, and cultural rights. For my country, Gabon, member of the Human Rights Council, I would like to affirm here that all of our public policies are conducted continuously in accordance with the recommendations of the UN for the promotion and protection of human rights, especially those contained in the VDPA. In this context, our work has focused in recent years on guaranteeing the rights of the most vulnerable people, particularly youth, women, indigenous people, and persons deprived of their liberty. For the benefit of young people, we have undertaken a number of public policies aimed at protecting them from various forms of violence and discrimination. In this case, we have built mechanisms to strengthen their autonomy, guarantee the youth participation and their political, economic, and social integration, and combat school failure, dropout, guarantee their access to high-quality health care. As far as women are concerned, in the past 3 years, we have improved our legal system through the adoption of innovative laws that have improved our legal system, reducing or even eliminating the gaps that still exist between men and women. We have a national strategy for the promotion of women's rights and gender equality called Equality in Gabon. We have set up mechanisms to effectively protect women against conjugal, domestic, and professional violence, to guarantee their freedom to engage in economic and professional activities, and to offer support and legal assistance to the women victims, and also to promote their participation in the political life. And also we provide health and legal assistance for women groups. The success of this strategy has enabled our country to make a significant leap in protecting and promoting women's rights by placing it at the forefront of the country's agenda in terms of gender issues. Considering the indigenous peoples is also an important focus of our human rights policy. Our government has always worked for their effective integration into society. For example, the policies for the systematic registration of births and ensuring their representation in parliamentary assemblies. Regarding detained and deprived individuals and public policies pursued by my country, prioritize respect for their dignity, gradually guaranteeing that their conditions of detention are in line with international standards. Of course, as in many other countries, we continue to face problems of prison overcrowding due to outdated detention centers, but we are working to improve these conditions through the rehabilitation and extension programs of existing prisons, and also to create within them the aim of the project to improve the provision of housing for women and minors, and to improve the water supply and medical treatment systems for the prisoners. And we are also working to put in place policies to prepare for reintegration policies with training workshops, and most importantly, provide education for detained minors as part of a program to enable them to successfully pass various primary and secondary exams.
And more broadly, and in order to guarantee effective protection of the rights of these different populations, we're working to strengthen national promotion and protection mechanisms. In this context, the imminent adoption by Parliament of the bill reorganizing the National Commission on Human Rights, enabling it to strengthen its independence in accordance with the Paris Principles, which is an important step forward. Similarly, we also strengthen our cooperation and collaboration with human rights mechanism. This fully respects our commitment to respect international commitments that we have made, as demonstrated by some human rights reports drafted and submitted in recent months. Distinguished ministers, ladies and gentlemen, all these policies, which form part of Gabon's tradition of respecting human rights and the dignity of human beings, are of course carried out in compliance with our freely entered into international commitments and with the support of our various international partners, notably those of the United Nations system, but also bilateral partners such as the Chinese government, who do not hesitate to accompany us, support us, particularly in our capacity building and technical area. We have the obligation to fulfill our commitments, but also we need to take into consideration the needs of our people. So within the dialogue framework with other countries and the international communities, Gabon has always been committed and paying close attention to our human rights governance policies. So in our partnership with other countries and international organizations, we also pursued our own policies based on our own specific conditions. Gabon's human rights governance is based on international practices and experience and aimed at promoting the general well-being of all of our peoples. And I think this is the general principle and also the fundamental one that we should adhere to, and that is in line with the nation's development and growth. Ladies and gentlemen, I cannot conclude my remarks without addressing to the people and the government of the People's Republic of China our warmest thanks of the Gabonese people and the highest authorities of our country for the welcome and a kind consideration they have extended to me and the entire delegation. Thank you for your hospitality and your invitation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Minister. Thank you for your speech and addressing this forum. And last, certainly not least, let's welcome Mr. Zhang Weiwei, Director of the China Institute of Fudan University. 最后，让我们用热烈掌声欢迎复旦大学中国研究院院长张维为老师发言。有请张老师。
Distinguished leaders, experts, scholars, dear friends, good morning. Today, I am going to talk about the implication of human rights governance in China. In the past years, China has seen itself eradicating its absolute poverty. 800 million people were out of poverty, and 400 million started to be a middle-income population. It is a miracle in the Chinese history and also in the world history. Very inspiring, very encouraging. The United States never believed poverty eradication is an issue of human rights. And for European countries, they believe that poverty eradication is one of the barriers for human rights. But for China, from any sense, we believe that poverty eradication is one of the fundamental rights for its citizens, and China has been committed and invested to put into reality. So in terms of poverty eradication, China has been the leading country in this world, and that is very, very much encouraging for developing countries in the world, and that can provide valuable references for developing countries in their own poverty relief process. So it is foreseeable that more and more developing countries will learn from China about how to lift their population out of poverty. And Chinese modernization is a very important boost for our poverty eradication and is more advanced than that of many other countries. That is because we have a totally different understanding of human rights. Because China is a highly educated and civilized country, and China has its own specific conditions, history, tradition, and culture. And based on all these, Chinese government develops its policies, and people always stays at the heart of our governance, and the people is the foundation of our nation. With the solid foundation, which is the people, can we have a prosperous and strong nation? Can we have a shared future? People, the top priority of our governance. And that is also one of our most important experience in the past 40 years reform and opening up. And that is also why Chinese government has always been committed itself to promoting poverty eradication in China. And this principle has been deeply embedded in our national policies and actually has kind of opposite to the practices and philosophies in the Western countries. If we date it back to history, I'm afraid we will have seen that one of the most prominent thinker in the Enlightenment movement represent those property-owning class. And the racism, colonialism, slave trade were all legal activities. And poverty happened mostly in those colonialized areas instead of European countries. Now, when half of the world population is now in poverty, haunted by wars, absolute poverty, hunger, and the lack of basic materials, most of the developing countries find themselves hard to provide fundamental well-being to their citizens. And at this time, we found more than ever before how significant that Chinese modernization is. And to some extent, this fact redefines modernization in this modern world. For example, the United-induced war in Afghanistan. Billions of dollars were spent in Afghanistan, causing nothing but displacement, sufferings of the Afghan people, and 3.2 million children suffer from severe malnutrition. According to the United Nations coordinator, 95% of Afghanistan's population have no access to food. And On the contrary, Chinese government used only 1/10 of the Afghanistan financial resources from the U.S. lift 800 million Chinese poor people out of their absolute poverty. And it is a miracle in human history. And we can even make a theoretical hypothesis from this. If we follow this Chinese pattern with $2.3 trillion, we could almost eliminate extreme poverty in the whole world, including that in the United States. This expenditure is also sufficient to exempt 45 million Americans from their heavy loan burden for universities and colleges. However, the U.S. government is unwilling to do so, since the U.S. political system has long been kidnapped by the U.S. military industrial interest groups. They have made a lot of money through wars, including the Afghanistan war and the Russian-Ukraine conflict, but they have brought crisis and even disasters to the peoples around the world, including the American people. Giving continued priority to development and staying committed to the people-centered approach are the fundamental solutions to poverty eradication. So based on that, GDI put forward by President Xi Jinping and China's complete set of philosophy and practice for poverty eradication have greatly enriched the philosophy and practice of global human rights governance. That's all. Thank you.
好，感谢郑薇薇老师的精彩发言。今天早上，习近平主席向我们的全球人权治理高端论坛发来了贺信，我们都感到备受鼓舞。今天上午在开幕会环节，我们也听到了各位领导和嘉宾从不同角度分享了对人权的见解。刚才呢，我们又听到了10位重量级的嘉宾、学者、业者，从各自的角度和理解，对人权带来了他们的真知灼见。Fair to say that we learned a lot from this morning's session, and thank you very much for all the keynote speakers for broadening our understanding of what human rights is all about. Once again, thank you very much for attending this ceremony. It is coming to a close. Thank you. Please enjoy your lunch. 感谢大家的光临，我们下次再会，谢谢大家。